Today I'll not be doing much of the talking. I am very pleased to introduce our speaker for the day and actually the individual who is going to be our expert in residence for this last and final cycle. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Haki. We call her Haki for short. Haki has spent a large amount of her career in the, I don't know what to call it, is it development world or not-for-profit universe? So she spent time at AMREF. Those of you who are not familiar with AMREF, it is a service, a local service that I think has actually gone Africa-wide, and it's a healthcare service. She spent time at KCB Foundation. KCB is Kenya Commercial Bank, which is, if not the largest, possibly the alternate, so one of the largest banks in Kenya. She spent time at IDRC and then at the Rockefeller Foundation. So has had a lot of experience in terms of hearing, contributing to, and understanding the art of storytelling as she tells impact stories across the African continent. She has recently kind of diversified her portfolio on a personal level and has become known as one of the foremost storytellers that we have in the continent. I really think I will not do it too much justice, but I should really say about Haki is, number one, I have known her for a very long time. We grew up as family friends and living literally right next door to each other. We played together as kids, and it's really fantastic to see that we continue to play together as adults in the work that we're doing. And, you know, when we were thinking of who the best person would be for this session, there are very many people that can tell you, you know, how to get your pitch to the perfect level. I think, you know, we had the opportunity very early on in the program to observe each one of you delivering your first level pitches. I think that the work that we've done over the last 4 to 5 months in the program has been very much around honing your narrative and the skills that you needed to build in and the capabilities that you needed to build into your product. And so when we looked at who the best person would be in terms of stitching all of that together, for me, it really felt that this, you know, I felt, you know, kind of listening to the cohort, there's a super solid story around the problem that you're solving for and a super solid story around the customers that you're targeting and how your technology or your solution helps solve that problem. But there's this one big element around how to then package it into a story that would really allow you to boost your engagement with your audience, but B, also with the investors that we'll be inviting into this final cycle and also the demo day. And so in my mind, I felt that possibly one of the best candidates to be able to bring that to life and help the stories kind of come together and deliver a nice package to those audiences was going to be Haki. So I'm going to allow her to speak for herself. And then I think she's got a couple of slides to take us through. But I really felt, you know, I've done very many of these accelerators. And even before I started doing it on my own, within the everyday work that I did when I was at Microsoft, a lot of work that I did involved listening to startups and hearing startups pitching. And I think that for me, significantly over time, one of the huge gaps has been that ability for a startup founder or whoever's delivering the pitch to really tell a story that creates, one, an emotional bond, 2, allows them to take investors or whoever the audience is on a journey with them, and then 3, that really remains memorable and is able to create like unforgettable impact, right? So the stories that people remember. And so my hope in terms of this cycle, and as I introduce Haki to you, is really that comes together and that you're able to pick up on what those elements are and how you can build the story around your product, your solution for the customer segment that you're looking at, and how you can tell that story to an audience that then ultimately feels that they really want to bet on you. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over the mic to Haki. I'll ask you, Haki, to do the better job of introducing yourself and then maybe take us through what you have for us today. I expect us to take about an hour, a little bit over that if we run over. Please ask questions. This is an open session, and we're looking forward to a really engaging discussion with you, Haki. So over to you.
Thank you, Tonya. So, you know, when people have known you for a long time, they know everything about you. So Tonya, I always like, she uses my childhood name, and I try to tell her, imagine I'm a professional. I'm a grown woman. So every time she calls me happy, back to like the 10-year-old version of myself. But she does it with love, and therefore I accept it. And because we're talking about stories, I will even choose to embrace it. Because the wonderful thing about because the wonderful thing about stories is that they take us back to a place of really joy and discovery and creativity. And that usually started when we were children. We have a way that we start stories here in Kenya. And when we want to start a story, we say paukwa, and people say pakawa, sahani, yamchele, or we say hadithi, hadithi, hadithi njo. And whenever I say that in, you know, a group of adults, immediately I see people's faces lighting up, because it takes them back to a time of their childhood and a time of stories. So I invite you to gather around our metaphorical fireplace, our digital fireplace in this virtual room today, as I talk about stories, why stories are important, and give you a little insight into how to construct a great story. I do have one ask. I'm one of those people who feeds off the energy of others. And it's really hard for me to do that when I'm seeing names and Black spaces. If you don't mind, if you could turn on your video. I see that there was a couple of people who had them on, like Gideon and somebody else, and now they've turned them off. Thank you, thank you. Yes, I like to know that my message is landing with somebody and being received by somebody. So if you could turn on your video, I will really appreciate it. Wow, wow, we're going across Africa, right? And I'd love for you also, as we kick off, to just drop in the chat, how do you start a story in your language? So just start it, just write it down and say what part of the world or what part of the continent that starting comes off. And the reason I wanted us to start off with that is because I think that that's really where stories start. Stories are as old as mankind. Literally, when we go back in time and we look at the things which have made us human beings and not humans just doing, we were always trying to make sense of our world. We're always trying to figure out, how can we communicate to others? And story has been the way that we've been able to do this since time immemorial. And therefore, story is actually hardwired into each and every one of us. No one has to explain to anybody how to accept a story. Unlike a business plan, a pitch document, a log frame, a results-based framework, all of those ones we had to learn along the way. But stories is actually something that each and everybody is hardwired to receive. And that's why we really want to go deep into then using this as a business tool that actually helps you as an entrepreneur or as a leader invite others into the work that you do. Now, I know that a lot of you are, you're working with young institutions, you're working with startups, you're trying to raise money, you're doing all these things that will make your company grow. And very few people at that stage have the opportunity to actually invest in communications, a team that's doing that. If you do have that, you're very, very lucky. If you don't worry, you are in good company. But this is why, as part of this BimaLab process, you get to have the kind of support which me and my colleague Agatha will be providing you over the next couple of weeks. How do I tell the story of my work? And having gone through the portfolio that I've seen, this is work that is so important. And the reason that I get excited about it is because it's happening here in Africa, on my end, and just showing just how fantastic we are as a people. The funny thing about us Africans is that we're not very good at telling our stories. We're not very good at tooting our own horns, unless you're from one particular country on this continent, and I won't say who you are, but by and large, right, we're very unassuming in being able to tell our story. And when it comes to promoting your business, helping others understand that you have a solution that is actually working, stories is what can actually get you there. So with that, allow us to kick off and talk about why stories. Like I said, from the time that we were children, stories have been used to actually inform, help us understand, why does the world work the way that it does? Stories enable us to also pass on messages to children, to other people, for them to understand, how does our society work? What are the morals and the values and the ethics in our stories? We have done this through, I remember for some reason in my culture, there was always an ogre in the story. So there was always fear as part of the story, but you did things because you didn't want the ogre to catch you. And that in essence helped me as a child understand what was good and bad within my society. So the first things that stories do is that stories inform. The thing is that stories actually are the thing which triggers emotion. And here I really want you to think about think about the difference between the way that facts, when it comes to businesses, are told, this is our return on investment, this is our growth, these are our scale plans, versus this is actually who we serve. Because farmers have this particular product, they're able to insure themselves against catastrophic expenditure. Because doctors are able to invest in our warehousing and being able to track the medical supply chain, they're able to actually serve patients when they're supposed to. That's what we want to hear when we talk about stories. We want to feel the energy and the emotion that will actually move us towards action. And stories are very powerful tools that enable us to do that. The third thing is, as shown here, is that stories trigger action. When well crafted and you get the emotion going and you are able to see that actually there's an injustice here that I just don't feel happy about, or there's a potential here that could be blown up, or there's an opportunity here for me to be able to invest in and serve 100,000 people with this community when it comes to agricultural resources or medical supplies. A story enables us to see how we can be part of a future solution that changes the narrative. And that's what you actually want to be able to do with the stories that you tell. So people would ask, why should I tell a story as a social change actor, right? And there's very many reasons, but I really just want to focus on 4, yeah? The first one is cohering. When you are in the business of changing society, changing populations, changing the way that people actually think that they should do things, you want to be able to gather them together. You want to help them make sense of what's standing in front of them and see that actually there's another way of doing business within the society, within this population. So you want to bring coherence and clarity to an actual situation. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that you want to help with imagination, right? And stories are wonderful at doing that. Some stories are so, if anybody here is enamored by or into science fiction, right? You understand that it takes you into new worlds. It helps you to see the world in a completely different way. I love the background that is being used by, I'm going to say your name incorrectly, so forgive me, Chifiwa, yes? He has this whole background of the earth behind him, right? And it is, the sun is coming over it. You're seeing the lights on, you know, some different countries. You can imagine things that are happening, right? If that was a background that was being used for somebody, for instance, who was working in the area of energy and electricity, you can imagine what that would be. Stories help move us into a new and different version of what could potentially be. And that's why we want to use them as social change actors, because you're actually taking people from what is now to a future where things are actually different. The third thing is narrating. We know that things have always worked this way in this location, but a story actually tells us there's a different way and a different system and a different opportunity that is inside of us. So even though you know the story has always been, I don't know, our cows die when there's drought, now we can re-narrate and actually have a different version of a story where there may be drought and our cows may die, but that does not mean that I no longer have a livelihood, because I have been exposed to something called weather-based index insurance, right? So stories help us re-narrate that which is in front of us and help us move to a new and different future. And the last thing that we want to do as social change actors is use stories to build understanding. And for this one, I really say on this particular element, you have to go with the personal. I need to understand why it is important for me to invest in you, right? What is my role as a potential investor, as a partner, as a policymaker in helping you actually reach your goal? And a story can help me understand what is my role in making this new version of the story actually come to life. When crafted well and when told with clarity and conviction, a story can actually help us as social change actors to move to this new future. So one may ask, why use stories? There's a very simple reason. Stories are remembered up to 22 times more than facts alone. You want your story to be sticky, right? You want the reality of the work that you're doing to stay with somebody. And the best way to do that is to deliver it on the bed of stories. And I really want to encourage you, not just for this particular lab, but as you go forward, to always think about, okay, I could tell the facts of the work that I do. I have 10 employees, we're trying to reach growth, we're moving from 2,000 customers to 42,000. Is there a way that I can tell this as a story? When I grow and I reach 42,000 customers, this is what is going to be different in this community or in this country, right? In that way, you're making sure that out of all the other facts that they heard that day, that particular story sticks with them. Earlier today, I was working with some people who work in livestock, and what they're trying to do is build a value chain for people to start thinking about leather as a way of increasing economic opportunity. The one thing that was said, which really stuck with me, and it's again the number 22, is that every cow can make on average 22 pairs of shoes. Each cow can make 22 pairs of shoes. So every time we throw a hide away, instead of transforming that hide into a pair of shoes, we're actually losing the opportunity to make sure 22 children walk to school with shoes. 22 shoes are built by shoemakers, and all the other things that happen in terms of economic activity. I can tell you, for one, I'm never going to look at a cow again without thinking about 22 pairs of shoes, right? And that's how we make sure that the ideas that we're sharing are actually embedded within the context and the people that we're talking to. Think about the story behind the work that you do. I'd like us to move now to actually seeing just one particular story or one person delivering a story and using that as a way to connect with people. Oh, sorry, I skipped over one slide, but I'll come back to that, right? So allow me to stop there and another. So I hope this is not where always there's a tech fail. I'm really hoping that this is not where the tech fail is going to happen. But if it is, please just forgive me. So we're going to watch a video, which is about 5 minutes long. And then we'll have a little bit of a discussion about that particular video. Yeah. So let me switch now to that screen. Oh, and I should say, this is from 2004. And I don't want you to use it with the hat of your, what do you call it? With your political persuasion. forget politics. But I want you to listen to this as if you were, one, an American, and two, a member of the Democratic Party. And the reason why I'm telling you who you are receiving this story as is because speaking to a specific audience is really an important part of storytelling. So with that, I'd like to go over to the video. Yeah, there we go.
is pretty unlikely. My father was a small village in Kenya. He grew up herding goats, went to school in a tin roof shack. His father, my grandfather, was a cook, domestic servant to the British. But my grandfather had larger dreams for his son. Through hard work and perseverance, my father got a scholarship to study in a magical place, America, that shone as a beacon of freedom and opportunity to so many who had come before. While studying here, my father met my mother. She was born in a town on the other side of the world, in Kansas. Her father worked on oil rigs and farms through most of the Depression. The day after Pearl Harbor, my grandfather signed up for duty, joined Patton's army, marched across Europe. Back home, my grandmother raised a baby and went to work on a bomber assembly line. After the war, they studied on the GI Bill, bought a house through FHA, and later moved west, all the way to Hawaii in search of opportunity. And they too had big dreams for their daughter. A common dream born of two continents. My parents shared not only an improbable love, they shared an abiding faith in the possibilities of this nation. They would give me an African name, Barak, or Blessed, believing that in a tolerant America, your name is no barrier to success. They imagined me going to the best schools in the land, even though they weren't rich, because in a generous America, you don't have to be rich to achieve your potential. They're both passed away now. And yet I know that on this night, they look down on me with great pride. They stand here, and I stand here today, grateful for the diversity of my heritage, aware that my parents' dreams live on in my two precious daughters. I stand here knowing that my story is part of the larger American story, that I owe a debt to all of those who came before me, and that in no other country on earth is my story even possible. Tonight, we gather to affirm the greatness of our nation, not because of the height of our skyscrapers or the power of our military or the size of our economy. Our pride is based on a very simple premise, summed up in a declaration made over 200 years ago. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the true genius of America. A faith in simple dreams, an insistence on small miracles, that we can tuck in our children at night and know that they are fed and clothed and safe from harm. That we can say what we think, write what we think without hearing a sudden knock on the door. That we can have an idea, start our own business without paying a bribe. That we can participate in the political process without fear of retribution, and that our votes will be counted, at least most of the time. This year, in this election, we are called to reaffirm our commitments, to hold them against a hard reality, and see how we're measuring up to the legacy of our forebears and the promise of future generations. And fellow Americans, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, I say to you tonight, we have more work to do. More work to do for the workers I met in Galesburg, Illinois, who are losing their union jobs at the Maytag plant that's moving to Mexico, and now are having to compete with their own children for jobs that pay $7 an hour. More to do for the father that I met who was losing his job and back the tears wondering how he would pay $4,500 a month for the drugs his son needs, the health benefits that he counted on. more to do for the young woman in East St. Louis, and thousands more like her who has the grades, has the drive, has the will, but doesn't have the money to go to college.
So I'm going to stop it there and just share the reason why I'm sharing this particular video. When Tonya asked me to speak, she asked me to share the anatomy of a great story. And there is a specific framework that I like to share, which was developed by a professor at Harvard called Marshall Gans. And it's called public narrative. And it was what Barack Obama used several years ago as a way to kickstart action. Now, public narrative is a very interesting tool, and it's made up of 3 distinct parts. And I will tell you something about that particular speech in 2004. Okay, now we all know who Barack Obama was. At that time, pretty much no one knew who he was. He was a junior state senator from Illinois, and he was actually introducing the potential candidate for the Democratic Party, who was John Kerry. By the time he was finished, everyone was saying, but who's that guy, right? And I want to actually know more about him and his agenda for us. And it was really because he kicked off his speech with this tool that's called public narrative. How do you inspire, as a leader, people towards action? And I'd like now to take you through the 3 parts. Part number 1, he started off with the story of himself. Most leaders, when they start off telling a story about their institution, will start talking about the how and the what. And if you've watched work from Simon Sinek or listened to him speak, he always says, start with the why. And the why is often inspired by our personal journeys. Barack Obama talked about the fact that he was an unlikely candidate to be actually even standing there as a junior senator, right? His family came from a very diverse background. He was an immigrant. He was the son of a Kenyan student and an American, right? He came from both an immigrant experience and from a wholly Midwestern Kansas American experience. He talked about his grandparents, one who was based in Kenya, the other one who was based in the US. However, both came from working class backgrounds, right? So with each element that he's sharing about himself, what was he doing? He was connecting with people in the audience who no doubt had the same experience. People who were 1st or 2nd generation immigrants, people who came from working class backgrounds, people who came from, homes which came from multiple parts of the country, people who came from the Midwest, people who came from Hawaii. And he did it not by saying, this is who you are, but by saying, this is who I am. And what was he able to do by sharing that specific story of self? He was able to connect with his audience. He was able to close the social distance between them and him. And so whenever you think about when you're sharing a story, whether it's to your team members, to your board, to your potential investors, how are you showing up as an individual, not just as the leader of your team or of your institution, but what are the things that make you uniquely qualified as an individual to stand in that space? The other important thing about sharing the story of self is that it introduces vulnerability. And we want to be able to know that the people who are in charge of the things that we do are not just automatons, but are humans who we can actually trust and who build a sense of trust in their ability to take us forward. So the first component of a great story is sharing the story of you. Then there's the second. Now that I've told you all about me, why should that matter to you? And that's always the thing that I want you to keep in mind. As your listener, why should I care? I care because you have actually shown that the things that you are bothering you are bothering me too. If you're talking to a group of investors, and in all likelihood, the investors that you are speaking to have already, they're looking for money to place in the area that you're working. What are you going to tell them that will make them understand that actually you and I, we already see this world in the same place? We see this as a world where we can actually save families from falling into poverty because we want to use technology. We both believe in the fact that we can make a change for doctors who are overworked and overwhelmed by providing them with insurance, right? What are the things that both your audience and you believe? And how do you draw that together? And again, he did that very, very skillfully when he talked about the vast elements of his experience and how he landed up where he was. With each thread, he was connecting with the people in the room. And that's why I asked you at the very beginning to receive this story as a certain demographic. Yeah. Every time you tell a story, you have to think about the audience who are receiving it. And I know that you've been to those meetings where you're listening to somebody who's speaking up there and you're wondering, do they even know which meeting they are at? Because whatever they're saying is really just not connecting with the people in the room, right? You don't want to be that speaker. And I know that you don't want to be that speaker, okay? The last element is the story of now. It's really, really important. The story of now can be thought about as your call to action. As Barack Obama was winding up, he talked about there's more to do for that factory worker, for that young woman who wants to go to college, she has the grades, for that father who is thinking about healthcare for his child and his inability to afford medication. That's the urgency. That is why the people in that room have to make sure that they vote the right way, right? So the story of now, which is your call to action, is now that you've told me all these things about yourself, about your business, about your prototype, about your value proposition, about your return on investment, what can I do? I would like to use two examples, which is a very easy way of thinking about a call to action. One is whenever you watch YouTube videos, there's always a subscribe now, right? That's a call to action. If you watch this YouTube video for this long, please make sure that you subscribe now. Another one that is used in very, very, very often if you're a church-going person is the altar call. It's been a fantastic service, and now it's time to make sure that we bring this thing home, right? People, when moved by a story or by information, remember we started off by saying inform, emotions, and action. When they are moved, there's something that they need to do with it. And they want to know, what is the next step? How can I be part of this? How can I get excited and be able to contribute? And the reason why we do business storytelling is for this. It's not for the two parts before. That is social storytelling, my story of self and my story of us. For business storytelling, the story is the reason why I'm sharing this information with you, so that you, my audience member, can think about, oh, I need to connect those guys with so-and-so. Oh, I'm willing to put in $5,000 or $50,000 into this. And so when you're crafting your story of now, you have to think about a couple of things. One, how do I make the barrier to entry very low? Remember, subscribe now, just click, right? So what is the equivalent of, oh, I know exactly what I need to do. I just need to click, I need to donate, I need to, whatever it is. The second thing, you have to communicate the urgency of it. We need to make a change now because El Nino is coming. We know that there's people who are going to be affected, right? There's an opportunity in front of us to make a change. So there has to be urgency about it. The third thing is that the person who you're speaking to needs to know that they're the person who you're speaking to, right? So don't be vague. If you're looking for $50,000, say I'm looking for $50,000. If you're looking for a location to pilot your work, and it needs to have certain characteristics, it needs to be in a semi-arid area, it needs to have a functioning county government, whatever it is, be specific so that I know, oh, I'm the one who can actually provide them with that information. So please make sure whenever you're talking about your call to action or the final thing which you're delivering within your pitch, which we'll talk about later this week, that there is clarity in your ask and in the call to action activity that your audience can connect with. So what does this particular framework do? It does a couple of things. The story of self can be thought about as a call for leadership. What was my journey towards getting here and how I landed in this? And then the next thing is that it actually ties to and builds community with the people who, what are our shared values, our shared experience, our shared beliefs, the things that we know to be true and the things that we want in terms of our reimagined world. And then there's the urgency. Now that we know that we are together, what can we do about it? And that's your story of now. And that links back to your purpose. So it's a virtuous cycle and it's a virtuous loop, which when used well, can be a very, very powerful tool. I want to go back to audiences, right? And this is really something that I would like for you to think carefully about, because your audience determines a couple of things. What language am I going to use, right? Am I going to switch towards different languages? The simplicity of the language? I can tell you this, as insurance people, I know that you use language as armor. There will be jargon that you will use that might lose your audience if your audience are also not technocrats, just like you, right? So whenever you're testing out your story, your pitch, whatever it is, think about what is the language that will enable me to connect with my audience? And 9 out of 10 times, it literally is language that will help you communicate to a 15-year-old. Keep it simple, keep it layman. And in that way, inadvertently, what you're doing is keeping it human. You're no longer thinking about professional, which is the armor that we tend to use, but you're keeping it human. This is what economic transformation means. It means that a farmer is able to send his child to school without worrying about fees. That's economic transformation, yeah? So think about language. Think about the age of the people who you're talking to, what background they come from in terms of, if it's, I work with a lot of scientists, if it's other scientists, are they specifically in your area, or they, general PhDs who might not know all the details of some of the words that you're using, right? What is the place and the examples that you're using in terms of context? If I was delivering this session to people who were sitting, in Tonga or in Australia, maybe some of the examples that I would have used in terms of the picture are different, right? How can we make sure that we're continually connecting, reducing that social gap between you, the speaker, and the audience? So I really want you to think carefully about what's my audience. And I know that by the time we come to demo day, you will have been given a profile of who are the people in the room, right? So you're also not making the wrong asks when you're doing your pitches. Okay. With that, I just want to close with a reminder that when you tell stories and when you tell a good story, you are moving people on emotion, because how people behave is actually not based on what they think. It's based on how they feel. We may claim to be rational beings, but at the end of the day, we all really move with that thing that is just like, it feels right, right? And that is in the science of the brain. So what I want you to do as you prepare your stories and you think about, how am I going to communicate? Remember, how am I going to make my audience member feel so that they can decide to do the action or take up the action which I'm offering them as a way for us to partner together and move together. With that, I want to thank you and hand back to Tonya.
Thank you very much, Mwihaki. You notice I said it right there. I think that was really interesting. I can see even there's a bit of applause coming in from some of our members here. So guys, I mean, obviously this is the time when we open up for questions, and to warm up the room a little bit, if you have a question, please put up your hand and I'll call upon you. Obviously, I prefer that you unmute your mic and ask the question yourself. It may not be a question, it may even be a reflection or some thoughts that are in your mind that you want to share with us generally. So if you can put up your hand, oh, of course, Pazion, thank you so much for going first. So I won't shoot my question. I'll allow Pazion from Ethiopia to go first. And then if anybody else has question or comment, please put up your hand. It would be great to hear your views on the conversation. And that's just kind of setting the pace for what the rest of this cycle looks like. So Pazion, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was a very insightful message. My question is, the idea of call for action makes sense, because at the end of the day, there's a message that we are communicating with the audience, but the sense of urgency, do our message always have to convey urgency? That's just something that because I hear this also in a different setting where you have to press upon people to take some specific action, so bring sense of urgency. So that sometimes especially when we pitch for investors and whatnot, we put ourselves in a place where we feel like we have to demand results right then and there. So that sense of urgency, if you can clarify that a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Pazion, for the question. So I think urgency has a couple of elements to it. The first element is that you want to communicate that there's an opportunity right here in front of you, right? So essentially, you're trying to tell the person, you're lucky that you happen to be in the room today, because we have an opportunity. In the next couple of months, for instance, we are looking at a growth and scale-up plan, and you have the opportunity to join us. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like, without you, we're not able to move. But guess what? You can be our partner. Come join in the move. The second thing is that it might actually be urgency in terms of a window that is closing. Yeah. So a lot of you are actually working in agriculture. So it could be dependent on, your prototyping or your scaling up, and it's dependent on harvest cycles, for instance, right? So you are beholden to make sure that if we're actually running a test on something and we miss the next, set of rains, then we're actually losing an opportunity to be able to test out our prototype. And then the last element is that I want you to think about urgency as you don't want the person to forget what the opportunity in front of them actually is. Because next week, they'll be on to something else. Yeah. And it's not that you're going to create a false sense of urgency, but what you're trying to create is an opportunity to make a decision now, right? That they're into. For some people, like if it's a if the demo day is physical, the call to action could be, I will be having, a stand outside this particular meeting room, and I invite you to come and interact with my team and I and learn more about our solution. Right? So urgency can be used in different ways, but essentially the reason why we use urgency is to communicate that don't lose the opportunity that's in front of you. Okay, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tanya, you're on mute.
And you should know how far I'd gone. Okay. So thank you, Pazion, for that. And thank you, Mwihaki. So there's a question in the chat window. I'm just going to read it out to you and just have you respond to it. So this is from Jihan, from Alika. And the question is, a lot of storytelling requires imagination and sometimes story deformation to make it more attractive. But is there another way of telling the truth as it is? Because sometimes it's not as exciting as it seems. And it's interesting, Jihan asked this question, Mwihaki, because I had a similar question. For me, was like, sometimes it borders on manipulation or feels like exaggeration to attract investors or to attract customers. And so how can founders strike that balance between authentic storytelling and the need to create hype and buzz around their ventures? So I think it's kind of connected to that. So sometimes it's not as exciting as it seems, And so you feel kind of manipulated or pushed to have to tell a story that's more exciting than it is. So how do they get to that point of authentic storytelling and balance that out with the excitement that you want to create around your venture?
So luckily, you will have 2 trainers working with you to help tease out the elements of where's the excitement in my story. Because honestly, sometimes you can't see it for a number of reasons. You've been in the weeds, you've been doing this for so long, you've said it 300 times, you're like, this story is just flat. But we will be working with you to listen to the work and then be able to ask the questions which are like, actually, have you thought about this or have you thought about that? You would be surprised that actually there is no boring story. What there is boring delivery, right? And I would highly discourage anybody from trying to manipulate your work, right? It is important and authentic in and of itself, which is why it's even in this accelerator. The question is, why is it that I haven't been able to find the hook within? Let me give you an example of a pitch that I recently pitched team. Excuse me. They were digging boreholes, and they were digging boreholes in the deserts of Iraq. And they were trying to dig boreholes and find water so that when they would have refugees who would spill over from other countries, and you already know that Iraq is a very water poor country, they would be able to service them. That's what they do. They look for water in deserts. When it came to their pitch, what we finally got for them was that they started off with this beautiful, do you remember that, what do you call it? That background that was the background of the earth, right? So their opening slide was actually something similar, but it was of the moon. And they started off by telling the story of, have you ever heard of people looking for water on the moon? And that's the last frontier that we need so that we can think about new colonies for humans in space. And NASA has been using this technology since, I don't know which year, to try and find water on the moon. And guess what? We're using that same technology to try and find water in the deserts of Iraq because we need it to help provide resources for refugees who are coming and are in need of water. Space technology here on Earth. Now, it's a bit different from we're just drilling boreholes looking for water, is it not? None of it is unreal. I mean, none of it is untrue. It's all about what is the thing about your story that's actually most exciting, that takes people into a different way of understanding your work. So now all the people were talking about after that was like, oh gosh, space technology, right? They had forgotten that it's drilling of boreholes. It was all around the sensoring that's being used on the moon. So we will work with each and every team to try and figure out what is the special source. Because the other thing is that you guys are all doing your pitches on the same day. And you're all in insurance. We need to make sure that each version of the pitch is different from the last version because we want everybody to be excited about and being able to differentiate between 23 different pitches that, oh, they were the ones who talked about this and they were the ones who talked about that. So our work is cut out for us. And I would want to encourage you that by the time we come to our coaching session, come with it all. We will help you figure it out.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mwihaki. That was a great question, by the way, Jihan. I think that it's a question that many people battle with. And I think in a way also, it touched on what my next question, your response touched on what my next question was going to be, which was around how do you help startups find their unique story or a way to differentiate themselves in a crowded space, right? So it's a demo day. We're going to have 23 companies pitching. How do you stand out? What strategies do you use? And so I liked, you touched on that, and maybe we'll touch on it again now, which is to kind of then set the pace for the group here. Like, like what can they expect? So I know next week, Thursday, we're going to have a session that's going to be a group session for everybody. But after that, we're going to go into the one-on-one engagements that the two trainers, you and your partner, will have with the different startups on that are part of the program. What can they expect out of that? And what do you want them to take away from that? And how do you want that engagement to look like?
Number one, don't be shy, right? So you said that Africans are not good at promoting themselves. This is not the place to do that. You come with everything. And this is now when I'm talking about the coaching session, yeah? Very often, people come with the version of the last pitch that they did and the last deck that they used. We don't want that. So I will tell you this, when you come for your session, come with, and some people even have come with 1 or 2 team members, we just want to hear the story of your work. And we'll ask you a couple of questions. And by the end of that session, we will give back to you some ideas in terms of, okay, I'm hearing this and this and this and this, go back and refine. And I would like to encourage you to trust us, because we will hear all the others, yeah? And therefore, we'll be able to know, okay, this one actually has a better version on this, when they're talking about a population in this particular location. This one actually has a stronger story when it comes to the technology that they're using. So be open and know that we are on your side. We're here to make you look good, okay? So I want you to be able to trust the process. That's the first thing. The second thing is, don't come with your old deck. No, but we'll talk about that again. We'll talk about that again next week. I know it's a temptation, and I know that people are really busy and they don't want to build a new deck, but trust me, yeah, we'll be able to deliver your best effort that way. You will have 2 hours with us, and we'll be able to give you feedback between our 2 coaching sessions, so that you are actually in a strong position that by the time you're coming for your demo day, you are good to go and you're feeling confident in what you'll be able to deliver.
All right, thank you. And of course, during demo day week, we'll have a pitch practice as well that you will be there for. So for the ventures and the cohort on the call, just remember that these sessions, after Thursday's session, the sessions will be one-on-one with you. And that's when Mwihaki was referencing some people come with a couple of team members. We recognize the fact that this is likely, or we probably get better results when you're able to have one-on-one consultation time with them. And so we've kind of built it that way. And we will share instructions. We've got a booking link, so you're able to book time with them at a time that makes sense both for you and for them. And please, attend your sessions. Trust me, it's going to be really worth it. And I think that whatever you come out with is going to be valuable, not just for the demo day, but for your pitch to customers going forward and other investors that you want to engage with going forward. All right. Okay. So any other questions? I have one last question. If anyone else has a question, please go ahead and put up your hand and I'll call on you to kind of share with us. But in the meantime, maybe, Mwihaki, just a final question from me, which is, are there ever any mistakes, storytelling mistakes? Have you ever seen that with startup founders? What can you give us 1 or 2 examples of mistakes? And maybe you're thinking around how these are corrected and what people need to take away with them in terms of thinking about how they communicate with investors, with customers, and with employees as well. And then once I'm done with that, I see Gideon has a question. Should I ask him to ask it now? And then you can answer both of them. Okay, Gideon, please go ahead.
All right, thank you, Tonya. And thank you for the session too. My question, I think, somewhat has been answered during her just under submission, but I want to ask if she can actually delve deeper into that. Whether must the story necessarily be true? That's my question.
Yes, it must be true. Especially when it comes,
because I'm asking this. I'm asking. Hello. Yeah, I'm asking this because from my point of view, I think it flows well when the story is true. That is why I'm asking this, and you wouldn't have to be, suffering to put out certain things. That's why I asked this question. And you spoke to it about its authenticity, and I just wanted to also confirm that.
I know that there's some startups who worry about, but we haven't yet proven our product yet, right? We're still in the prototype stage. How can we then tell the story of a persona whose life we have changed? Don't worry. We will work with the version of wherever you are in your product journey, right? So that one, I will say unequivocally, yes, it must be true, especially when you're looking for other people's money, it must be true. Don't promise what you don't have. Back to your point, Tonya, around, oh, sorry, gosh, have I forgotten now? What are the things that, and I even had the answer in my head. Now I've forgotten the framing of the question.
The question was around storytelling mistakes.
Mistakes. So it actually, the first thing that I wanted to talk about was authenticity, which goes to what Gideon was sharing just now. Authenticity has a couple of facets to it. One is the whole thing around truth and trust deficits. You don't want to build a trust deficit with your audience, right? What you're actually trying to do is make a connection in terms of the trust social gap, right? So that is really, really important. The other thing about authenticity is that I see some people have watched TED Talks, they've seen other founders, do these pitches, and they're like, I want to be like that guy. No, be the best version of yourself, right? Yeah. Your version of the story and the way that you will deliver it is the most important thing. And I don't know if this is actually open to, because I'm not sure about what the travel arrangements are. You also have to ask within your team, who's the best person to tell our story? It might not be the founder, right? A more authentic voice and representative for your product could be a team member, could even be a beneficiary. So you have to think carefully about who is the most authentic person to deliver this story for us, right? So I'd really like for you to think about authenticity as the key thing. The second key thing is audience. Please don't develop a pitch for a different audience and miss the mark in terms of the ability to connect. You want to make sure that you go deep in terms of being able to connect with your audience and not lose them from the very beginning. The third thing is your assets. And your asset is, what are you going to have with you on stage? It's everything from what you decide to wear that day to what is my pitch deck going to look like? Might I actually be better off without a pitch deck? Do I need to come with an example of the product that I use so that people can understand when I say that we have a handheld product, this is actually what it means. So think carefully about the asset so that you do not make the mistake of trying to over communicate something which could be better communicated either in a one picture slide or a physical example. Okay, so those are the mistakes to avoid. Not going deep on your assets, not being authentic, and not thinking about your audience.
Great. Okay. Any other questions from the audience before I wrap up the call? I think we've sufficiently whetted people's appetites for the rest of this cycle. Mwihaki, thank you so much for the conversation today. I think it was great. In fact, there was one comment I think I saw from somebody there that was, I meant to read it out. So this is from Pesh, and she says, she's a fan of storytelling and she was just nodding yes throughout your presentation. Spot on. So I think that it touches the right notes as far as everyone is concerned. I think this is a part that everybody's looking forward to. I think we're open to learning. We can take all the help we can get, and we intend to bring our best selves to this discussion. So we look forward to Thursday's session. Thursday's session is obviously what will then kick off the pitch training and the pitch deck training and so on before we then go into the individualized and personalized sessions that you will be having with the team. I want to say thank you very much. I really enjoyed this discussion myself and some of the examples that you gave. Thank you to the cohort. I think some of the questions were wonderful. Actually, all of them were, and very nuanced and very honest and authentic. And I think that that's the right way to go into this. And I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday and really seeing the great work that happens through this cycle that then gets you ready for the finale of the program. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Have a great week ahead, and we'll see you on Thursday at 5 p.m.